Just a hooker with a heart of gold. Hello everyone, I'm Sarah from Everyday Starlet. Welcome to my channel. I make videos to inspire you to be the star of your own life. I'm continuing my masculine feminine energies film breakdown series with a highly requested film, Pretty Woman. If you're not familiar with what I mean by masculine feminine energies, I talk about this in most of my videos, but a brief summary. Masculine and feminine energies are energies that live within all of us. We all contain both energies, but we all have a core energy. This is when we're most ourselves in. That energy often links up with our gender. It doesn't have to, but it usually does. We can be in wounded or healed versions of either of these energies, and each of these energies has archetypes, and we can embody all of the different archetypes within us whenever we need to. And in order to have sexual polarity in a relationship, you need one partner to be in their masculine energy and one partner to be in their feminine energy, because opposite energies attract and same energies repel sexually. So let's get into the film. Pretty Woman is a film from 1990, and it stars Richard Gere as Edward. Now, Edward is a very, very serious businessman, and you can tell in this film he is very much naturally a masculine character. He has a lot of direction, he has a lot of drive, he has a lot of purpose, he has a lot of passion for his work. His work has actually become his entire life. And you kind of find out early on that he's going through a breakup. You find out that he has an ex-wife, he has an ex-girlfriend, and you kind of get the impression that most of them are demanding more time of him than he's willing to give them. The masculine will always put his passion and purpose before everything. So when the masculine is going to choose a partner, he needs that partner to be in support of his higher purpose. If he feels like his partner is not in support of his higher purpose, he's going to usually run away or back away, and there's going to be conflict. In fact, I mentioned this actually in my Star Wars breakdown about how the masculine knows he's in love versus how the feminine knows. And the masculine knows he's in love when he meets a woman who actually is in support of his higher purpose and doesn't hold him back from his higher purpose. So while it is natural for the feminine to constantly desire to be around the masculine because the feminine always yearns for more, if the feminine is very needy and needs a lot of the masculine's time and takes the masculine away from his greater purpose, he's going to start to build resentment and it's going to cause problems. Now, as a result of this breakup and everything going on, he actually gets caught up in his feminine energy and his feminine emotions and starts to act quite erratic. That's actually a sign that he's not comfortable with his own inner feminine energy. And he's obviously rejecting it, which is very common, and that happens a lot in masculine men when they feel rejected by the feminine or they have resentment towards the feminine. They tend to get caught up in their own feminine emotions. He ends up taking his friend's car, which he's not used to driving. It's a stick shift. He doesn't know how to drive. I don't even think he knows how to drive. I think they've kind of implied that he has just been driven around in limos his whole life. So he's kind of lived this pampered life. But he's used to having a lot of direction in business, but now he's got this car. He doesn't know how to drive. He's not in control of his vehicle. He's in his emotions and he's driving around a city that he doesn't know how to drive around by himself. So he's lost and he's driving around. So he's lost his direction and he's lost his control. He's lost two very important things that the masculine needs in order to feel like himself. That is when he stumbles across Vivian, played by Julia Roberts. And Vivian is a hooker. She's a prostitute that walks the streets, and you can tell that Vivian is very much, she's a very feminine woman. However, because of her profession, being a prostitute and probably dealing with a lot of men who are probably not very respectable, probably not very in very healthy masculine energy themselves, she's built up a serious masculine shield. You can tell she's mentioning to her friend that like she's not going to get a pimp because she doesn't want a man to control her. She's in survival mode, which makes sense. Like, she's trying to survive, so she's not looking for love and romance from a man. She's looking for like what she can get out of him. And she's got a real wall up when it comes to that. Now look, the masculine shield is not ideal for a woman to have, because when a woman has a masculine shield, she's likely going to block masculine men from coming into her life, men who have healthy masculine energy. The thing is, having a masculine shield is sometimes needed. You know, as women, there are times when it's just not going to be safe for us to be in the fullness of our feminine energy. So at times, we're gonna have to kind of put a little bit of a protective shield up. And that may not be unwise for her, considering her chosen profession at this point in the film. She mentions later on in the film that she's had a reputation for always meeting up with the wrong guys, even before she was working as a prostitute. And I'm sure working as a prostitute, she's probably had a lot of bad experiences. So I imagine she's probably had a lot of difficulty with men. Now, this is an extreme case, obviously, in her profession. However, most women in the world today have had some kind of, you know, from just bad or uncomfortable to downright traumatic experiences with men, and that tends to cloud us from actually seeing the good in men that are out there. I mean, I've never personally worked as a prostitute, but I did work in stand-up comedy, which meant I got screwed for way less money, but that's beside the point. I was surrounded by a lot of men, and some of them were not the healthiest of men, and some of them were great, but it does cause you to build a bit of a wall up because you start judging all men as being a certain way. And ladies, we've all been there, and I think even some of us, like myself, who've done a lot of healing work around that, we still slip into that sometimes, and that can be really natural. So Vivian is still in her very guarded masculine shield. Vivian thinks she can get some money out of Edward, so she starts to try to work it, right? And when she discovers he really doesn't know how to drive, he doesn't know where he is, and she's basically trying to get him to pay her to give him directions, like she's not giving away any freebies. She's taken control of the conversation. She's very much in her masculine, and she's met this very masculine man who's very caught up in his feminine emotions. He's lost, he doesn't have direction. She basically gets in the car, she starts driving, she has the direction, she has control of the vehicle, she knows about cars, she knows how to drive this car. She has so much more life experience than him, and he's been sort of in his pampered world. Now, even though he has a lot of masculine direction, in this particular situation, he's very much in his feminine energies, in his emotions. He's lost control, he's lost direction. She's very much in her masculine energy, and she has now taken the control. She has the direction. So they're getting along because they are in compatible energies. However, because they're not in their natural core energies, he's not really very comfortable not being in his masculine. And, you know, I don't really think that she deep down wants to be in her masculine energy. I think she really wants to relax into her feminine energy. So as much as they are drawn together because they're in opposite energies, because they're not in their natural core energies, they're not quite linking up sexually. I mean, there's an attraction because they're both attractive people, but there's not like that deep connection that you would expect from two people who have like a spark and a sexual chemistry. So Edward invites Vivian back to his hotel room, and it's interesting how she's kind of trying to initiate the sexual activity. She wants the money, she wants to get it over with, and he's kind of trying to be more sociable. He's trying to kind of get to know her, and she's kind of getting a little frustrated with the whole thing. And again, they're kind of off. Like, he's more personable in this moment and she's more directional in this moment. So their polarity is still off. She goes into the bathroom and she goes to floss her teeth. He thinks she's doing drugs and decides he wants her out of the apartment, and she basically says she's got floss and she's flossing her teeth. And he makes a comment that, like, not many people surprise him, and she had just surprised him. It's little surprise moments like that that actually spark interest in the masculine, especially a masculine man who's typically very focused and has a lot of direction. It can be very easy for the masculine to get like tunnel vision and very focused on things. In fact, most masculine men have tunnel vision. They need to focus on one thing at a time. So when something kind of like sparks them and kind of wakes them up and surprises them, it can be a real turn on for the masculine. There's also a scene where Vivian is watching I Love Lucy, and she's laughing and she's giggling and she's really enjoying herself, and she's just sort of like, she's just lying there watching, and Edward is just watching her watch the TV. The masculine will usually be drawn to the thing that gives off the most light, whatever's the most radiant thing in the room. And the TV is pretty radiant, right? Television is very radiant. But Vivian she's so much more radiant. And the masculine can't stop staring at her because her radiance is coming through. Like, for the masculine, watching the feminine enjoy herself, be in pleasure, enjoy something, smiling, being playful and happy, that is so intoxicating to a masculine man. Like, just being playful and open like that is such a turn on for him, because he's now seeing her feminine energy come through. He's seeing her relax and having fun, and he's now stepped back into his comfort zone of having his direction, of having his purpose. He knows where he is. He's not sort of wandering and lost anymore, so he can get back into his masculine, and that's when they start to come together with more sexual chemistry. Now, Edward decides that he needs a date for some events that are going on throughout the week that he is there in California, and he decides to hire Vivian to be his basically on-call girlfriend for the week. And it's interesting, like, she's in the bathtub when they're negotiating the scene, and she's just sitting there, she's singing, she's playful, she's listening to her Walkman, which some of you kids watching may not even know what a Walkman is, but you know, she's listening to music. She's just kind of like in her vibe, in her zone. She's in the bathtub. She's just being a sensual being. And Edward is just so mesmerized by her. He says that he wants a professional because he doesn't need any kind of romantic entanglements throughout the week to distract him. The masculine doesn't really want to be distracted by romance. Doesn't mean that the masculine doesn't enjoy romance, but the masculine never wants romance to distract from his true purpose. And of course that's foreshadowing for the future that he doesn't want romantic entanglements, and that's exactly what he gets. Shocker, right? In Hollywood. Go figure. So he gives Vivian some money and tells her to go shopping, and she tries to go shopping versus the iconic scene where she gets kicked out of the clothing store because they're judging her because they don't think she belongs in a fancy, expensive store. And then Vivian goes back to the hotel and she's approached by Barney, and Barney is the hotel manager, and there's a really interesting dynamic between Barney and Vivian. Now, at first, Vivian is very guarded. She's upset, she's in her emotions, but she's keeping herself very guarded. Barney approaches her and starts asking her a lot of questions. She's very defensive, and he gets very stern with her and ends up bringing her into his office. He knows she's a hooker, and he wants to make sure that his hotel does not become an attraction for hookers. He wants the place to stay classy. He's very stern with her, and he sets really clear boundaries with her about her stay, and that she's allowed to stay because of Edward, but he doesn't want her coming back for other people or to be hanging around there. And he sets very clear, stern boundaries. It makes Vivian uncomfortable. However, it's a very fatherly nature. It's a very stern, strict, fatherly energy. And that confident boundary setting structure, as much as it upsets Vivian because she's in her emotions and she's frustrated, she ends up feeling safe enough in that energy to let go and tell him about all the frustration she's been having, about how she tried to buy a dress, she couldn't buy a dress. That's when her guard drops. She drops out of that self-protection, and she lets herself be seen and vulnerable in her emotions. And that vulnerability is actually a strength, because if you think about it, you put a shield up to protect yourself. So when you let that shield down and let people truly see you, that's a strength in itself. And that's when Barney decides to help her out. Because a masculine man will always want to help and protect the feminine. It's just, oftentimes, if the masculine doesn't feel the feminine's feminine energy coming through, he often thinks that she doesn't need his help, because especially if you have a woman who is in her masculine energy or has a masculine shield up, the masculine tends to see her as another male. So he doesn't have that drive to help and protect her. Whereas when he sees a feminine woman and he feels that feminine energy, that's where that drive to protect kicks in. And that's when Barney decides he really wants to care for Vivian. And it's from a really fatherly place. It's from a really protective place. It's not lecherous. It's not because he's trying to get something from her. It's like he genuinely feels this drive to help her. And she actually feels comfortable going to him a few times in the film, and he helps her out because he's become this like safe space for her. Now, the first scene when Edward takes Vivian to a business meeting, it's basically with this older businessman and his grandson, and they're at this very fancy restaurant. And it's interesting because Vivian isn't really used to men being so gentlemanly to her. And like, she stands up to use the ladies' room and they all stand up. She's kind of like thrown by that because she's not used to that gentlemanly energy. Barney had actually taught her how to, you know, which fork to use and like table manners and basic table manners. So when she gets her food, she's looking for a salad fork, but she doesn't have salad, and she's confused. And the thing is, Edward is just very like directional. Edward and the grandson are very like, they're in their masculine, they're being very directional. Edward is basically just telling her, just do this, just do that. Like he's very like short and just telling her what to do. And Vivian is very uncomfortable. It's not her comfort zone. I think it's really interesting how the older gentleman kind of leans over and it's just like, I never know which fork to use either. And then he just starts eating with his fingers, so she starts eating with her fingers. And it's such a moment. I think it's a really good lesson for women, because I think often as women, we feel like we have to be perfect at everything. We feel like we can never let anyone see that we don't know exactly what to do at exactly the right time. And I think that's where we get into this, the idea that being feminine means that we have to have perfect table manners all the time, and we have to have this sort of like prim, perfect demeanor, and we have to be so demure. And there's a time and place for that for sure. And if that's something that you are, that you embody, then wonderful. However, there's gonna be circumstances in everybody's life where we don't know the right thing to do, and we don't always say the right thing or do the right thing, or we don't always know what the proper etiquette is in every moment. And being feminine is not about knowing the proper etiquette or the proper fork to use in every moment, but it's about being comfortable being seen in those moments where you're not perfect and where you're not at your best. And it's that relaxing to that vulnerability that can very often inspire the masculine to step in and want to be protective, to want to be supportive, to want to be there and to see the feminine's radiance. And it's really beautiful when you have this older gentleman who's obviously, you know, a very gentlemanly type man. He wants to step in and make her feel comfortable because he knows she's a little uncomfortable. And I'm not at all saying that any woman should be dumbing herself down or dimming her light or making herself smaller just to accommodate the masculine at all. We're all gonna have those moments where we're not perfect, where we don't do things the exact right way. And allowing ourselves to be seen in those moments and not trying to pretend that we're perfect and great at every single thing can be so beautiful, especially for a masculine man, because he's gonna see that vulnerability, and a truly healthy masculine partner is gonna love you for that vulnerability. He's gonna love those moments of imperfection because they make you human and they're beautiful. So if you're a feminine woman, shine and be the best you can possibly be, but also allow yourself to be seen in those moments where you're not perfect, where you're not doing everything the exact right way. Because those moments of imperfections are just as beautiful, if not more so. There's so many moments in this film where Edward is just so mesmerized by Vivian, by her, I would call it maiden energy, but she's got a lot of lover energy. Like, the fact that Edward is so mesmerized by her at so many moments. I think the opera scene, the first time that she sees opera, and Edward actually mentions to her that the first time someone sees opera can be very moving. You either love it or you hate it. And he was very curious to know how she was going to react to it. Now, he'd seen opera before, he'd experienced it before, so it wasn't his first time, but he was so much more interested in witnessing her and witnessing her emotions, witnessing her. I mean, she got emotional. She was tearing up, and that glow in her, the way she was moved by the opera. Edward was more mesmerized by her being moved by this than he was in watching the opera itself. And it's another example, and there's so many in this film, of the way that the masculine is so mesmerized by the feminine, by her radiance, by her responsiveness, by her emotions and feelings. There's moments too where, like, when Vivian catches Edward playing the piano, and playing the piano, it's almost as if like that's his feminine outlet, like that's his sensual outlet, that the music, the piano, it's very sensual. It's like kind of almost like that's his inner feminine coming out and flowing, and then when she comes to join him, she becomes the feminine energy that he is now intoxicated with. There's also a really poignant scene. It's a short scene, but I think it's really poignant, where the two of them are in the bathtub together, and he's basically like confessing everything about his life. He's talking about, you know, things from his past, and she's like holding him in the bathtub and they're naked, and he's just talking about his life, and he's basically being so open with her. That's another thing about the masculine. The masculine is not usually very comfortable in his body. He works better in his mind. The feminine is more about the body, and the masculine is more about the mind. So it's really difficult for the masculine to get out of the mind and into the body. And one of the best ways to get a masculine man into his body and out of his head and out of his spinning head is to cultivate sexual energy, you know? And it's not just about like jumping to sex, but it's about that skin on skin. It's about that physical touch. It's about that sexual energy that can come from sex, or it can come from just sensual touch. And that can actually drop the masculine out of his mind. I think that's often what women mean when they say they want men to be more vulnerable and they want them to open up more. Is really when the masculine gets a little bit too much in the mind, and she wants him to drop into his body and to drop into his feeling, to actually open up and open up his heart to her, as opposed to being closed down, because the masculine can sometimes feel quite cold. I mean, they're in a warm tub, she's holding him, she's touching him, just skin on skin, and that's when he feels comfortable to start really opening up to her, is because he's actually now dropping into his body and feeling more in his body as opposed to living up in his head. And that's kind of an ongoing theme throughout the film, is that he's always had so much masculine direction, and Vivian coming into his life is really dropped him into his body. He's not constantly in his head. He's feeling more of his intuition. He's feeling more emotions. He's actually letting stuff come up for him. He's letting himself feel for other people, as opposed to just constantly being in that masculine direction. He's not like in an unhealthy masculine. It's just he's so masculine that he's shut off any connection to his feminine energy, and he's not actually embodying some of that intuition. Like, his business had become cold, and he was starting to open up his heart more, to think more about people, to think more about creating things. All those things are feminine energy, and that desire to start wanting to do those things, about having more community, thinking more about people, using his intuition more, wanting to create things, those are all inspired by a feminine partner. I would say healing a lot of his connection to the feminine, because he hasn't felt much of a trust for it in the past. Now, Philip is Edward's lawyer. He's pretty much a jerk. There's a scene that really pisses me off, where basically Philip feels that Vivian has become too much of an influence on Edward, and that Edward is making some business decisions that Philip doesn't like, and he believes it's because of Vivian. So Philip basically decides to essentially try to assault Vivian, because it's gonna make him feel better. And he even kind of says that, like, well, if I have you, then it'll make me feel better about losing Edward, or losing the power that he's had. I mean, I don't love the term toxic masculinity, but that's like wounded masculine right there. I mean, right in one scene that epitomizes wounded masculine. That's like, I'm going to hurt you, or take you, or assault you, or something, because I don't feel like I have the power that I want. So if I take your power away, it's gonna make me feel more powerful. That's the masculine in its most wounded form, and in a very extreme case. Vivian is defending herself. Edward comes in, and Edward basically jumps to Vivian's defense. That's the healthy masculine. The healthy masculine will jump to protect the feminine, or really anybody who needs protection. The masculine has a strong drive to protect. Whereas when you get into that wounded masculinity, that's when you're getting into, I need to hurt someone to make myself feel more powerful. And there's a big difference, because I think a lot of women have seen the wounded masculine and now distrust all masculine energy. And that's why it's so important to really pay attention to the healthy masculine energy in our lives, so that as women, we can heal our own inner masculine, we can heal our own judgments against the masculine, and actually really do believe there are good men out there. Because as women, we can all get caught up in that there's no good men out there thing. We've all done it. We've all been there. And that's how we heal from it. It's realizing that those wounded masculine men that have hurt us, that's not masculine energy. That's wounding, and that's their trauma, and that's their issues. But there are healthy masculine men out there that have a drive to protect us. Now, Edward and Vivian have clearly fallen in love, and they're fighting it. And I will say, Vivian is really amazing in the end when they're kind of saying goodbye, and Vivian holds to her boundaries. She does. I mean, Edward gives her a really sweet deal. He's basically willing to take care of her and put her up in an apartment, basically just essentially kind of be like a sugar daddy type of situation. She tells him she wants more. She's willing to walk away from all of this cushy lifestyle to go back to a life where she doesn't really know what, you know, when her next meal is going to come from. She's in a very unstable environment, but she knows now what she wants. And she's not willing to just settle for part of what she wants. She knows that she wants the fairy tale, as she says. She wants someone who's going to love her. She doesn't just want to be taken care of financially. She wants the love too. And Edward is hesitant to give that to her. As much as he does love her, he's hesitant because he's seen it fail so many times in the past. And he's seen women in the past who needed too much from him, who took away from his passion and purpose. When in reality, Vivian has been massively supporting his passion and purpose. She's rejuvenated his purpose, actually inspired him to take his business to the next level, to move forward in something that was exciting him. I mean, she's actually been a huge inspiration for him, and she's been hugely supportive of his purpose. He's just still hesitant because in the past, women haven't been in support of his purpose. And of course he decides to find her, and they have this whole, like, it's supposed to be like a white knight riding up on a horse, but he's riding up in a limo, and he's running up the stairs like to the balcony, which is really a fire escape. And he's gonna rescue the princess, and there's a really great moment at the end. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen this. What does the prince do after he's rescued the princess? And she's like, she rescues him right back. In reality, the two of them have rescued each other. And it's very much that they started out where he was in this very rigid masculine and rejecting the feminine, and she was in this very masculine shield and couldn't let her guard down. And they've healed each other because he's become a safe space for her to lower her guard and for her to actually be in her feminine. He's actually been inspired by her feminine. It's actually made both of their lives better. It's basically a relationship that has healed so much of them. And while yes, he is the guy with the money that is probably going to financially take care of her, in reality, she's bringing so much to his life with her energy, her playfulness. She's been inspiring him to be a better man, and it's been softening him, it's been opening his heart. He's now doing business more with an open heart. It's just improved every area of his life. It's improved his life. And so they're actually bringing beautiful gifts to each other, and it's making both of them better. So in reality, they've kind of both rescued each other. You know, he gave her the fairy tale, but again, she really gave him so much as well. And I always say the mark of a great relationship is when both partners think that they're the lucky one, because they both appreciate what the other one is bringing to the relationship, because each person is bringing to the relationship something that the other person couldn't bring to the relationship, and they come together and they flourish together. There's so many great moments in this film. Thank you so much to everybody who requested this, because I know this was highly requested. If you haven't seen this movie, or even if you have, after you watch this video, I highly suggest that you rewatch the movie and actually see if you can pick up on some of the things that I mentioned in this video. If you have any other film requests or any comments about this film, let me know. Leave a comment in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you. I love your suggestions. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please give it a big thumbs up. If you are a woman who would like to connect to your feminine energy, I have an online course called Feminine Radiance. Details are in the description box below, along with links to all my social media channels. And I also do little mini breakdowns of the films that I do here, because I can't really include film clips typically. YouTube doesn't like them. So I do little mini film clip breakdowns on my TikTok, so be sure you follow me there. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you join me next time.